He keys a convoy position at midnight, just routine, and halfway across the Pacific, 3 American needles snap to the same bearing. At a shore hut, the watch chief draws an X. At Fleet Radio Unit Pacific in Pearl Harbor, a clerk tapes a dispatch. On a Palau-class boat, a skipper reads 5 words that change the ocean. Turn 275, close, night attack. That is HF divided by DF, high-frequency direction, finding turning dots and dashes into torpedoes. Americans built towers, vanes, and shipboard sets that made radio a trail of crumbs, and we followed every crumb to the kill. Now, the hard question. How do you hunt across an ocean bigger than the moon's face? You map the noise and the enemy. Frupak fused shore bearings with intercept reports and pushed short, clean vectors that cut days off a search. The miracle wasn't a single gadget. It was people radiomen with pencil lines, analysts with patience, skippers with nerve. America trusted a 20-year-old watchstander to draw a line that would move a submarine and change a war. Radioman Second Class Red Alvarez, hair matted from the phones, whispers, dots and dashes to torpedoes, boys. He passes the slip to the quartermaster. The captain nods once. Diesel and hot oil hang in the throat. A lookout catches screws. The TBT swings. 2 merchants show black on black. We are here because a distant operator broke radio silence for 60 seconds. Across the world, German officer Herbert A. Werner would describe what it felt like when Allied bearings, radar, and aircraft worked together. Almost overnight, the hunters had become the hunted. He heard insolent Aztec pings shower like hail, then depth charges that made steel moan. His pages are the soundtrack of our method. Intelligence was not a memo, it was a weapon in American hands. The enemy thought distance made them safe, Americans made the ocean smaller. Bearings became courses. Courses became spreads. Spreads became sinkings that shaped history. This is our opening shot. Ordinary Americans, drawing lines on paper, turned invisible waves into the sharpest edge in war. The bridge lamp glows red. The skipper breathes. Open outer doors. A radio mistake just signed a death warrant. We fire and fade, already plotting the next voice that gives itself away. Because our island factories build more boats, our colleges turn out more radiomen, and our faith in free minds turns signals into victory. A young lieutenant in Washington lifts a phone and speaks for a new kind of fleet. Task group, come right to 040, bearing steady from HF divided by DF. Launch. That voice belongs to the U. Navy's 10th Fleet stood up on 20 May 1943 to pull every thread together, shore bearings, shipboard, huff-duff, radar, traffic analysis, and convoy routing, and to direct the hunt the same day. Anti-submarine measures, operations, air coordination, even a civilian scientific council. America built a brain for the Atlantic and gave it authority. No other nation fused intelligence and command like this at global scale in 1943. On the flight deck of an escort carrier, an Avenger's prop bites the wind. The radio man has the bearing, the pilot has fuel, the destroyer screen has patience. A contact flashes on the horizon. A sonarman whispers, "Mark." A green flare pops, and then the ocean lifts. That is what it looked like when a radio impulse became steel and fire. Back inside the 10th Fleet plot, analysts publish the monthly U.S. Fleet Anti-Submarine Bulletin. Sailors call it the Yellow Peril lessons learned turned into orders before the next patrol shoves off. American speed is not just machines, it is how we share what we know. Werner, writing of April 1943, admits that when Allied carriers, long-range aircraft, escorts, and improved radar were brought into conjunction, fully 40% of the U-boat force was destroyed within weeks. Almost overnight, he says, the hunters had become hunted. He remembers insolent pings, near continuous barrages, and the sickening quiet after a lethal pattern. Use his fear as our proof. A free people built an information engine and trusted lieutenants and petty officers to run it. We trained kids from Kansas to read a cathode twitch and push that truth to sea in minutes. An ocean once ruled by chance now answered to math, radios, and courage. Tonight, the plot shows 3 new bearings, crossing on the edge of the air umbrella. The duty officer pencils a box, stamps a message, and signs with a single word that says who is in charge, execute. Those 5 letters move ships, pilots, and men who don't know each other, but believe in the same flag, and in the idea that knowledge must move faster than fear. This is how America fights. We build the brain, we feed it facts, and we let it point the spear while our sailors close for the kill. A map room in Pearl glows at midnight, pins and strings crawling west like a living thing. A yeoman tapes a strip. 2 Japanese subs reported. 1 merchant convoy likely outbound from Formosa. The question lands like a weight. How do you hunt across 60 million square miles without wasting a single gallon of fuel? The answer is FRUPAC, the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, marrying HF divided by DF bearings to traffic analysis, so our submarines don't search. They arrive. Short, clean vectors move boats as if an unseen lighthouse is guiding them through black water. Coastal stations catch a burst. Shipboard sets confirm the swing. The plot closes to a box you can sail to. A Balau-class hull beats southeast, 5 bow tubes ready, the torpedoman quiet and sure. Turn 260. Increase to 18 knots. The helmsman answers, and a steel city turns under the stars. A smell of battery acid and coffee. A lookout tastes salt. We swear we can hear the key clicks that drew us here. Werner's words from the other ocean tell you what this felt like from below. Pings showering like hail. The forced crash dives, the sudden fearful rate of loss when allies brought carriers, radar, and escorts together. He writes that within weeks 40% of the U-boat force was destroyed, and by summer 1943 their sinkings had fallen to 150,000 tons per month, while Allied shipbuilding surged to 1 million tons. That is the sound of intelligence turned into logistics, and logistics turned into fate. Out in the Pacific, our boats learn to stalk traffic lanes with near-prophetic timing, because the math says where ships must be and radio says when they are there. We cut across bow waves like quarterbacks throwing to a spot. We hit fuel, rice, ore arteries that feed armies. A Japanese radio man presses a key for 60 seconds and writes doom for ships he will never see. An American skipper lifts his binoculars, counts the masts and whispers, "Match the angle on the bow." There is no magic in this scene, only Americans learning fast, sharing faster, and trusting the picture enough to risk a night surface attack. Open outer doors. The port list is slight. White wakes bloom and vanish. By morning there is only flotsam and a radio silence that comes too late. In October 1944, FRUPAC overlays tracked Japanese submarines day by day, pinning their habits to paper so boats like USS Tang and USS Barb could be sent where contact was probable. Not lucky. Maps showed weather, routes, and recorded positions. Messages distilled that mass into a single bearing and a time. That kind of clarity is courage for a skipper. He knows someone ashore is watching the whole ocean for him. When the periscope breaks the skin, the plan has already lived on a wall in Pearl. The ocean is still vast, but it is no longer empty because American minds have drawn lanes on it, and American hearts are willing to follow the lines into danger. 3 American submarines rise at dusk in a loose crescent, engines rumbling low, the Pacific sky bruised purple. A message from Pearl had set the trap hours ago. Now the convoy walks into it. Each skipper knows his lane and his time. We borrowed the word wolf pack from the Germans, but we made it American spread wide for the Pacific, tied together by radio intelligence, so every boat arrives on purpose. The destroyer escorts cannot be everywhere. We are where the bearings said they would be. Hold course. Let them come. A merchant shows dark against darker. Another follows, perfectly spaced by the enemy's own orders. Bow caps shiver. 6 fish run hot, straight, and normal. On the other side of the world, inside a German hull, Herbert A. Werner hears an ocean that has turned against him. He clearly distinguishes insolent ASDIC pings, then pings shower like hail, and the destroyers resort to the old game depth charges until the boat moans like a bell. That sound is the end of an idea. The idea that a radio can talk without being heard by the enemy. When Allies brought radar, carriers, long-range aircraft, and escorts together in April 1943, the math went lethal. Within weeks, 40% of the U-boat force was gone. By summer, the U-boat's monthly toll fell to 150,000 tons, while Allied shipbuilding hit 1 million tons. An ocean of chance had become a grid we could control. American packs in the Pacific learned to use that control as a sledgehammer. Approach on the surface with speed, picket the edges, and smash the middle under starlight. Radiomen pass bearings in whispers, quartermasters mark time to the minute. Gunners stand ready with the Chicago piano if an escort shows. A torpedo man wipes his hands and grins because he knows what the vector means. We will be where the enemy must be. Fire 1. Fire 2. The wakes stitch the dark. Explosions roll across the sea like distant thunder, and the pack slides away to reload and do it again. The names become legends in radio ink and battle reports. Tang, Barb, Silversides, Harder, each learned to trust the vectors coming from Pearl and to talk just enough to coordinate without giving the game away. American boat captains took the freedom they were given and turned it into initiative. If the bearing shifted, the plan shifted with it. That flexibility is a national trait. We mass-produce ideas the way we mass-produce steel, and when the enemy tried to answer with gadgets, the war had already moved on. Their snorkels came late, their ears were deaf underwater, and our queues were already filling with new targets. A pack is more than boats. It is belief in each other. That belief, plus bearings, is what makes a midnight ocean feel like home turf. The destroyer escort USS England hears a faint contact in May 1944 and refuses to let go. In 12 days she hunts down 6 submarines, I-16 on 19 May, RO-106 on the 22nd, RO-104 on the 23rd, RO-116 on the 24th, RO-108 on the 26th, and RO-105 on the 31st. That is not luck. That is HF divided by DFQs, married to a crew that trusts its gear and each other. England is a Buckley-class ship with 3 3-inch guns, hedgehogs on the bow, and a loop antenna on the mast that points like a finger. Bearings arrive. The team runs quiet, turns into the line, and throws patterns that rip the dark. One attack finishes in 19 minutes from first contact to confirmed kill. 6 boats in under 2 weeks, an American record that has never been matched. Picture the bridge, salt spray, headphones hot against the ears, the captain leaning over the plot while the sonarman murmurs, "Steady bearing." Mark. Depth charges are thunder. Hedgehog bombs are brutal punctuation that only explode when they hit metal. England shows what happens when the American way of war data in, action out lands on the deck of a single, well-drilled ship. The enemy's shock comes through in silence. Transmissions stop. The ocean is suddenly empty, because the lesson is clear: talk on the air, die in the water. Across the Pacific, our submarines are learning the same lesson in reverse. Let your enemy talk, and then be waiting at his next turn. A radio man in Pearl scratches a new vector. A skipper at sea shifts course without a meeting, without a delay, because the trust is built. America is big enough to build 1,000 sets and smart enough to fuse 1,000 bearings. We taught kids to run math at night, and we gave them machines that worked in the rain. The result is a moment like this. 6 wrecks on the bottom. 6 crews gone. A convoy route briefly safe for American troops and fuel. England's captain writes his report in clean Navy phrases. But every line hums with the same truth. Knowledge moved faster than fear, and steel followed. The message back to Pearl is simple as a prayer. Mission complete. Request more targets. A single diesel coughs in the dark, and you can hear an empire choke. Submarines made up less than 2% of the Navy, yet they cut Japan's arteries until the body went weak. Janak's cold ledger lists it with no drama. American submarines sank 4,779,902 tons of Japanese merchant shipping and 540,192 tons of naval vessels. Those numbers mean fuel that never reached Truk, rice that never reached Manila, steel that never reached Kure. It also means divisions stranded, factories starved, and a navy that could not replace what it lost. How did a small force swing that hard? Because we used intelligence as a multiplier. Frupak turned bearings and messages into routes, and routes into ambushes. A skipper could receive one short vector and know he was not guessing. His torpedoes would arrive where math and radio said the enemy must be. A Japanese lieutenant writes home about weeks at sea with empty tanks and one sad escort. An American radio man eats a sandwich at 0200, draws a new line, and sends a 6-word message that bends a boat toward destiny. That is how a democracy wins. Free minds making a million small decisions correctly, together. Werner's pages from the Atlantic echo across the Pacific numbers. When the Allies fused carriers, radar, aircraft, escorts, and yes, HF, divided by DF U-boat, results collapsed in a single season. The same pattern held against Japan. Once the net tightened, the outcome was math. In the span of a year, our boats became ghosts that showed up wherever the enemy talked. We did not need to brag. We needed to be reliable. Bowplanes hummed. Battery acid bit the nose. A helmsman eased 5 degrees right. On the chart, a grease pencil line met another line drawn by someone 1,000 miles away. That crossing killed a ship. And every ship that did not arrive meant a smaller war tomorrow and a freer world after that. Gato and Balao-class boats carried 5 forward tubes, 4 aft, a torpedo data computer humming like a metal heart, and crews who could compute a solution in seconds in green-lit control rooms. They learned to time night surface attacks to radar ranges and to let HF divided by DF set the table before they arrived. A captain like Richard O'Kane on Tang or Eugene Fluckey on Barb used speed on the surface, fired spreads, and vanished into black water before an escort could react. None of it worked without information, and America poured information into the fight until guesswork died. Factories back home made more sets, schools made more operators, staff officers in Pearl and Guam sent vectors. When the torpedoes ran true, a national economy felt it. By late 1944, even the enemy admitted the shipping lanes were poison. That is the long, quiet heroism of our submarine force. 2% of the Navy, more than half of Japan's losses at sea, and the lever that lifted a continent-sized war toward victory. He slips from Brest in March 1943 thinking the Atlantic still belongs to the wolf. By April, the water has grown teeth. Long-range liberators prowl. Escort carriers throw Avengers into grey skies. Destroyers listen with new ears. And every time the radio key clicks, Allied HF divided by DF needles prick the map. The slaughter will have a name, Black May, and a lesson. When Americans fuse technology, training, and command. The curve snaps. Bearings from shore huts meet radar from the air and sonar from the escorts, and the ocean becomes a trap that closes in minutes, not days. Inside one boat, the watch hears the first insolent pings. The petty officer grinds his teeth. Patterns walk in, plates groan. Herbert A. Werner, an officer who rode those patrols, later wrote that almost overnight the hunters had become the hunted. He was not making excuses, he was measuring a system. Carriers, long-range aircraft, sharp escorts, and direction finding were brought together, and in a few weeks about 40% of operational boats were destroyed. That's not a rumor. That's what happened when American brains met American will. Now picture the American side of the same hour. In Washington, the brand new 10th Fleet, activated 20 May, 1,943 runs. The plot like an orchestra. A lieutenant takes a bearing from a shore station, a position from a convoy commodore, and a contact report from a carrier group, and turns them into a single command. Execute. In the North Atlantic wind, a pilot sees a feather of wake. On a destroyer's bridge, the captain calls, "Hard over," and the ship shoulders into weather. A green flare climbs. The ocean takes a breath, and then bucks as patterns land. A German radio man sends a last burst and cuts his set, but the geometry is already against him. Direction, distance, speed, a triangle that becomes a funeral. The enemy was brave. They were skilled. They died because the fight had changed while they were at sea. The truth needs no polish. In a handful of weeks, the U-boat force lost boats faster than Berlin could build crews. By summer, the monthly sinkings they claimed fell to about 150,000 tons, while Allied shipyards launched around 1 million tons. That is the sound of momentum reversing. It starts with a click in a headphones cup and ends with a depth charge punching daylight through a hull. This is where our story tilts for good. America did not merely react. We recomposed the ocean. We made radios dangerous. We made time short. We made distance small. And every bearing we crossed told a young sailor he served a country that learns faster than fear. The final image is simple. A map crowded with fresh grease pencil X's and a quiet voice in the Combat Information Center saying, "New vector for additional units." When the plotter lifts his chin, you can see the new America at war, curious, connected, relentless. And the chapter ends with the wake of a sinking boat pointing straight toward the shipyards waiting at home. A whistle screams at the yard, and a Liberty ship slides into water like a new promise. She is an EC-2SC-1, 441 feet long, about 10,000 tons, a 5-inch gun astern, and a single stack smoking like a factory on payday. Welders peel off their masks and wipe grit from their eyes. Another hull already waits on the way. This is the American answer to torpedoes. Build faster than steel can be sunk, then protect the lanes with ideas. In the summer of 1943, Allied yards driven hard by US. Production launched close to 1 million tons a month, while U-boat sinkings fell toward 150,000 tons. The ocean's math broke the enemy's heart. From the slip we jump to sea. An escort carrier group, briefed with fresh bearings, steers for a point where a U-boat will think he has room to breathe. He does not. American pilots in TBM Avengers carry radar and depth bombs. Destroyer escorts carry hedgehogs and loop antennas that point like compass needles toward talkative enemies. Hold the line, a sonarman says. Mark. The patterns walk in. The ocean lifts, and the convoy behind them keeps moving, because the factory behind that convoy keeps moving faster. A German officer opens his copy of the war diary and sees numbers that make the stomach go cold. More hulls, more planes, more escorts. Even when a boat scores, by the time it returns to port the tonnage loss has been erased by America's yards. Herbert A. Werner measured the moment with bitter precision. Our sinkings fell to a fraction. Their production climbed to the sky. He heard pings like hail. He watched new air cover blossom where there had been grey emptiness. Walk the American yard again. Kaiser's crews trade rivets for welds, shave days from schedules, turn design meetings into moving cranes. The foreman shouts, the tugs pull, the bands play. Every launch gives a sailor on watch something quiet and holy. Time. With time, convoys arrive. With convoys, the front breathes. With breath, freedom grows teeth. The best part is human and small. A riveter named Lila pockets the stub of a pencil and claps when the sponsor breaks champagne on the bow. She does not know the name of the submarine that will try for the ship she built. She does know the yard will beat him on the calendar before he can leave his pens. That is victory, with an American accent, ordinary hands feeding an extraordinary machine. Now draw a line from that slipway to tonight's plot. The million-ton month is not a headline. It is the shadow over every ambush we set. Our intelligence buys a chance. Our production buys the certainty that the chance will come again tomorrow, and the day after that, until the sea itself feels American. He opens the ledger with shaking hands and writes what no sailor wants to write, lost with all hands. The entries pile up until the math feels impossible. By war's end, the U-boat arm has lost 779 of 1,150 commissioned boats. Of the boats that actually went on patrol, roughly 93% are destroyed. Personnel casualties climb toward 85%. These are not estimates, they are names on stone. They explain why mess decks fell silent when mail call ended and no one's name was there. Here is the problem stated plain. Could any force on Earth survive losing 93% of its fighting boats? And here is the answer: Americans. Forced on the sea? No. The method HF divided by DF bearings, radar searches, long-range air, fast escorts, coordinated command made survival the exception. Once the geometry closed, courage was not enough. The boats that lived were the ones that never got found. And by 1,943, 1,944, that number shrank every month. Now stand on an American destroyer escort's bridge in heavy weather. The captain squints through salt and spindrift. The sonarman calls a steady bearing. The attack officer watches the stopwatch and smiles a tired little smile. Walk it in. The ship's bow hammers the next wave and the pattern goes. The soundmen below hear the sea buck. Oil rises. Cork floats. A hat rolls by, unclaimed. No one cheers. The crew only nods and sets up again, because the plot has more bearings. Back inside a German pressure hull, the pings come faster, meaner, insolent, as Werner called them. After the crash dive, the boat is deaf to the radio world. The captain knows he is blind and the enemy is not. Depth charges, crack frames, roll men from bunks, shatter gauges. The petty officer promises he will write to a mother in Hamburg and then bites his lip because he knows he will not. The American miracle is the rhythm. Bearings from huts, vectors from fleet headquarters, air on top. Escorts at the edge. Submarines poised where convoys must pass. Every move makes the next move simpler. That is how you get to numbers that look like typos until you learn the steps. We close with a quiet scene because the truth is loud enough. A clerk at 10th Fleet sharpens a pencil and files the day's summary. The chart behind him is a snowfall of X's. The clerk whispers to no one, "Keep going." When the lights blink out, the sea is still moving ships our way, and the enemy's ledger is still bleeding ink. Tomorrow we will ask an even harder question. The one about what kind of nation builds a machine like this and keeps its soul. We will answer it not with boasts, but with the way our sailors write letters home, with the way our shipyards treat night crews, with the way our captains speak the word execute and mean it for freedom, not conquest. A young mathematician in uniform pins a fresh sheet over the Pacific plot and draws 3 arcs that almost meet. She is Ensign Ruth Klein, 23, graduate of a Midwest college, now a watch officer in Pearl. She does not carry a rifle. She carries a grease pencil and a radio schedule. Her world is bearings, call signs, and the tempo of a nation that trusts her to move ships with a line. This is the American edge you can touch. Freedom to put brains at the center of the fight and let rank serve speed. At 10th Fleet in Washington, staffers brief Adm. Ernest J. King on convoy dispositions and air gaps. Across the ocean at Pearl, Vadam Charles A. Lockwood reads patrol reports and approves wolf packs. The same morning, a Kansas farm kid becomes radioman 3rd class and sits down at an HF divided by DF console that hums like a hive. No one asks where his father worked or how he votes. They ask if he can draw a clean bearing and pass it fast. The process feels simple and is sublime. Shore stations catch the key clicks. Operators plot quick lines. Analysts cross them with traffic analysis. Who is reporting, to whom, at what hour, on what wavelength. Code breakers add context. Operations turns context into a course and time. A destroyer escort hurries to the box. An Avenger lifts off with bombs fosed. A Balau-class sub adjusts to meet a convoy at night. The loop completes. Radios that were once the enemy's hunting horn become our dinner bell. Werner's book gives you the proof, from the other side of the periscope. He remembers the month the world flipped, April 1943, when carriers, radar, aircraft, escorts, and direction finding brought into conjunction made U-boats die at a fearful rate. He remembers pings showering like hail. He remembers a boat that could not surface because American air had made daylight fatal. The American soul shows in the seams. We promote on merit and urgency. We publish lessons learned fast. The U.S. Fleet Anti-Submarine Bulletin sailors called it the Yellow Peril. Turns bloody experience into the next day's doctrine. The result is a culture where a petty officer can correct a lieutenant and the lieutenant says, "Good catch," and changes course. A storm batters the harbour mouth at dusk. Ensign Klein tapes a vector with rain in her hair. The dispatch is 7 words long. A submarine captain reads it under a red lamp and grins because the picture finally feels whole. He will risk his crew on that confidence. He will count on Lockwood to back his judgment, and on King to keep the carriers flying, and on welders in Oregon to keep the fuel moving. That is what freedom looks like in war. Everyone owns a piece of the kill chain. And no one hides the truth from the person who needs it most. A diesel coughs, a hatch clangs, and a lean boat slides under a white ridge of wake like a spear. She is a Balau-class submarine with 5 forward tubes, 4 aft, a torpedo data computer humming under red lights, and a crew that can compute a solution in seconds. She is part of a force that is less than 2% of the U.S. Navy by manpower. Yet this sliver will wreck an empire's shipping. The official post-war tally Janak gives the ledger. 4,779,902 tons of Japanese merchant shipping sunk, and 540,192 tons of naval vessels erased. Those figures are why railheads went quiet, tanks ran dry, and divisions never moved. Names fill the roll call of audacity. USS Tang under Kemdor, Richard H. O'Kane, USS Barb under Kemdor, Eugene B. Fluckey, USS Silversides under Semendar, Richard G. Voge, and later CDR, John S. Coy Jr. They attack on the surface at night, using SJ radar to hold range, trusting Frupax vectors to put them on the right lane at the right hour. Deck guns bark when torpedoes run dry. A bridge team whispers bearings against wind, and spray and never raises a voice, because calm is speed. The enemy is not foolish. Japanese escorts swing in with Type 93 long lance torpedoes and sharp ears. Aircraft prowl, coastal lookouts scan with good binoculars. But the pattern is against them. Our submarine captains are empowered to change plans without permission. If the bearing shifts, the pack shifts. If the convoy detours, we cut the corner. Intelligence has already shortened the hunt. American industry has already filled the tubes again. A prisoner of war taken off a burning freighter sits on a U.S. deck, shivering under a blanket. "Water," he whispers. An American messman hands him a tin cup and a slice of bread. "You'll live," the sailor says. That moment does more than any leaflet. It tells the truth about who we are. We fight without hate and still fight to win. The numbers are the simplest sermon. Less than 2% of the Navy, more than half of Japan's ships lost. Hundreds of tankers and freighters that never reached home. Naval vessels tallied in hundreds of thousands of tons. Every figure began as a radio key click, an analyst's estimate, a petty officer's clean bearing, a captain's decision, and a torpedo man's steady hands. Tonight, the Balau bows into a black chop, the captain tastes salt and coffee, and the last of his nerves. He knows a vector arrived because a woman in Pearl and a clerk in Guam and a farm kid in a shack on a rocky point did their jobs. He knows his country will have his back if he takes the hard shot. He does not pray for luck. He prays to see the masts on time. Then he gives the only order he trusts to change history. Open outer doors. A diver drops through cold green light and touches rust that once was a plan. The wreck is quiet now, a long steel question on the seabed. The numbers wait with it. 779 U-boats lost. Roughly 93% of operational boats destroyed. Casualties soaring toward 85% of those who served. Oil beads drift like dark snow. Somewhere above, waves slap a calm day. This is the scoreboard no one can argue with. Here is the problem we promised to face head-on. Why could the United States do this when others could not? The answer begins with scale and ends with trust. We had the factories, Kaiser's yards, Bethlehem, countless slips along two coasts pushing launches that erased losses. We had the schools, the labs, and the radio shacks. We had 10th Fleet in Washington and FRUPAC in Pearl, treating information like ammunition. And we had commanders who let lieutenants act, and lieutenants who let petty officers correct them, because truth mattered more than ego. Now, place two scenes, side by side. In a U.S. shore hut, a 19-year-old operator catches a 60-second burst and draws a line. In a German boat, a radio man finishes that same burst and transfers the log to a clipboard. In America, the line moves a carrier, a destroyer escort, and a submarine before dawn. In the boat, the clipboard becomes evidence at a court of inquiry if the boat ever makes port. One culture puts knowledge in motion, the other strands it in fear and hierarchy. Werner's words, beaten onto paper after the war, carry the weight precisely because he knew the taste of diesel and sweat. Almost overnight, the hunters became the hunted. Pings showered like hail. Boats died at a fearful rate. He was not praising us. He was describing gravity finally returned to the ocean. When carriers, radar, aircraft, escorts, and HF divided by DF came together, the U-boat ceased to be a strategy and became a target set. The last task is to tie the numbers to the nation. Million-ton months in the yards. Submarines, just 2% of the Navy, sinking roughly half of all Japanese ships lost. More than 4.7 million tons of merchant hulls and over 540,000 tons of warships. Convoys arriving because smart kids drew clean bearings. Air cover appearing because we built aircraft faster than weather. Destroyer escorts finding with HF divided by DF what courage alone could never find. Stand with the diver one last time. He taps the hull and sends a dull note into endless water. That sound is the period at the end of a long, honest sentence. America did not win by accident or by cruelty. We won by learning faster than fear, by trusting free people with big jobs, and by turning simple truths bearings, vectors, schedules into the most complicated truth of all. A safer world. When the diver looks up, the surface flashes hard white. And you know the story is over, because the light belongs to us now.